If they never asked for your side of the story, then the side that they heard is exactly how they feel about
Tuesday,
you.
September
Never
23rd,
explain yourself to people who are already
Jesus Christ,
dedicated
should we be
to
ready? Don't go clutching
misunderstanding
your pearls.
you.
I'm serious. Son of God, immaculately conceived Jesus, coming back for an encore. According to some religious leaders, it's the beginning of the rapture. The rapture, my dear ones, is a biblical event that Christians believe marks the second coming of Christ. The good will disappear from the earth. The evil will be left here to face doomsday. It's also the plot of HBO's The Leftovers. Now, September 23rd is Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, also known as the Feast of the Trumpets.
Good morning. Finally, a president-elect. George W. Bush will become the 43rd president of the United States.
Apparently, a plane has just crashed into the World Trade Center.
We're going to take a look at videotape just moments ago of the second plane hitting the World Trade Center.
There has been another major explosion, this one in the nation's capital. There is smoke in the air over the Pentagon.
We are getting information now that one of the other buildings, Building 7, in the World Trade Center complex, is on fire and has either collapsed or is collapsing.
Building 7 I often hear about. When no plane hit Building 7, why did Building 7 come down? What do you tell people?
What is Building 7?
Or was it Building 5 or the building that wasn't hit by the plane? Building 7.
I have no idea. I've never heard that.
The Project for the New American Century, which is a think tank that was around in the late 90s and up through 2005 or 6. There are about 17 members of this so-called think tank who were in top positions in the Bush-Cheney administration, and a couple of these guys, Fife and Wolfowitz, had earlier worked for Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel and put out a paper that advocated the same kind of program that they then put out papers for PNAC advocated, that is intense nationalism and militarism and going after Middle Eastern states with aggressive wars. There are several key papers that they published, and the biggest one maybe was in 2000 called Rebuilding America's Defense, as if they needed to somehow be rebuilt.
This is being seen on Capitol Hill as another Pearl Harbor.
Israel's former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has publicly said the September 11th attacks have been good for Israel. In the days after the September attacks, there were countless rumors about strange coincidences surrounding the events. One report about a group of Middle Eastern men spotted the morning of September 11th parked just across the river from New York City has not gone away. Investigation of their presence has led to questions about whether Israel was conducting espionage on U.S. soil.
It began when this woman was watching the Twin Towers burning from her apartment in New Jersey. She noticed 3 men on top of a van, posing for pictures with the towers burning in the background.
And I could see that they were like happy. You know, they didn't look shocked at me. You know, they didn't look shocked. I thought it was very strange.
The witness called police, who stopped the van hours later and arrested 5 men. All 5, it turns out, were Israeli. They were turned over to the FBI. Sources tell ABC News during a check of national security databases, some of the men were listed as having had connections with Israeli intelligence. At the FBI, that set off alarm bells.
The FBI needed the answers to 3 important questions. Who were these men? What brought them to that parking lot on the morning of September 11th? And did they have any advanced knowledge of what was going to happen that day?
After 71 days, 5 Israelis were deported.
Some U.S. investigators believe that there are Israelis again very much engaged in spying in and on the U.S. They may have known things they didn't tell us before September 11th.
The first part of the investigation focuses on Israelis who say they are art students from the University of Jerusalem and Bezalel Academy. They repeatedly made contact with U.S. government personnel, the report says, by saying they wanted to sell cheap art or handiwork. Documents say they, quote, targeted and penetrated military bases, the DEA, FBI, and dozens of other government facilities, and even secret offices and unlisted private homes of law enforcement and intelligence personnel. The majority of those questioned, quote, stated they served in military intelligence, electronic surveillance intercept, and or explosive ordnance units.
Lobby to the lobby. So I believe the bomb hit the lobby first. And a couple seconds in the first plane hit.
There were numerous secondary explosions taking place in that building. There were continuous explosions.
No, the first explosion, there was a second explosion in the same building. There were 2 explosions.
Okay.
There was another explosion that took place in one of the towers here. So obviously, according to his theory, he thinks that there were actually devices that were planted in the building.
And you heard the boom, 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 boom.
From the corner, boom, 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 boom. Just like 20 straight hits. And as the bomb people just started running, I sat there and watched it. A few of them exploded.
I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they would be able to contain the fire. I said, we've had such terrible loss of life. And this one thing was pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
In 2002, the Pentagon was infiltrated by Mossad. They did not need any identification to get through the rear entrance of the building. They went upstairs to Douglas Fife. Occasionally, they went to the second most powerful man, Paul Wolfowitz, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, and they had run to the Pentagon. Donald Rumsfeld, the Secretary of Defense, said to my boss one time, hell, I don't run my building. Mossad does.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon. I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people in the joint staff who used to work for me. One of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you gotta come in and talk to me a second." He says, "We made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on about the 20th of September. So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "We're still going to war with Iraq." He said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over his desk and picked up a piece of paper. He said, I just got this down from upstairs from the Secretary of Defense office today. And he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
Obviously, we'd like to see regime change decide in Iran, just as I'd like to see in Iraq. The question now is a practical question. What is the best place to proceed? It's not a question of whether Iran's regime should be taken out, but when should it be taken out?
In 2001, Congress passed the Authorization for Military Force, giving the president broad power to conduct military operations without congressional approval. Each time, it had to do with the American conflict with Iraq. But since then, both the Obama and Trump administration used what's better known as AUMF for other purposes. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. They can't have a nuclear weapon. Very simple.
So the only way that Iran will be stopped is if there's a credible military threat that ideally would be backed by the United States.
President Trump has just announced on social media that the U.S. has just completed 3 successful attacks on 3 nuclear sites in Iran.
If you look back to 1996, there was a study done for a fellow who was about to become prime minister for the first time. His name was Netanyahu. It was completed mostly by Americans. We would call them neocons. So they proposed this thing, and they called it a clean break. A new strategy for securing the realm. Okay, securing the realm. What realm? Well, the realm was Israel, greater Israel.
זה הוויז'ן שלי, זה אחד הדברים שחלמתי עליהם, מפת הארץ המובטחת. הגיע הזמן כל הזה משלם. אני לא נותן את זה לך, אני מעניק את זה לך כשתיתן זה חסרה. תודה רבה. אתה מתחבר לחזון? מאוד. באמת? מאוד. לישראל שלמה?
On the evening of September 11, 2001, after the world witnessed the tragic collapse of the World Trade Centers, a nearby building mysteriously collapsed, the WTC-7. How did this almost perfect-looking building collapse? The key to this mystery lies in this video footage. Did you notice a sharp V-shaped dent at the top of the building well before the main collapse? This was the penthouse of WTC-7. Exactly below this dent, you'll be able to observe the 3 main columns of the building. You can conclude that this dent happened simply because these 3 columns collapsed. The WTC-7 also had a perimeter tube design. 24 central core columns carried the main weight of the building. The core and perimeter tubes were connected using many horizontal girders. Unlike the other buildings, the WTC-7 had a penthouse, which carried heavy cooling equipment. Let's simplify the geometry of the girders for an easier-to-understand visual. You can see the penthouse of the building was structurally supported by the core columns. Here comes another twist. All 24 of these core columns do not extend all the way to the ground directly like this. When construction of the WTC-7 began, there was already an electrical substation on the site. Although the authorities didn't want to demolish this building, the location of the substation was interfering with some core columns. Exactly 8 core columns. This gave rise to a rather clever idea. These 8 interfering core columns were taken out horizontally to the substation and finally connected to the ground via these transfer trusses. By observing this visual, you'll get a clear idea about how the load of these 8 trusses were transferred to the ground. This structural technique is known as transfer truss method. The issue's not over yet. Few perimeter columns of WTC-7 were also interfering with the substation. They were also connected to the ground via transfer trusses. Even though 8 columns are not connected to the ground directly, these transfer trusses made sure that the central columns are still strong. Please keep the details of the structural connections in your mind. They'll play an important role in understanding the collapse of WTC-7. From the north side, this building looks intact. But let's turn the camera to the south side. This was the true condition of the building, enduring a huge fire, with a big gash on the perimeter columns. This is real video footage of the World Trade Center Building 7 from the opposite angle. You can see clearly here that the fire in the building was spreading on a large scale. You can imagine the damage it must have caused in the building. The WTC-7 had fires on multiple floors, burning over several hours. Because firefighters were busy saving the lives of those in the collapsed WTC-1 and 2, they were unable to suppress the fire in this building. Did you notice a long gash on the south side of the building?
I don't know when it's going to hit the news of what happened today, but the blowback from this whole ABC News canceling Jimmy Kimmel Live is historic. Not only are people canceling their Hulu app, their Disney Plus apps, their ABC apps, people are boycotting Marvel, studios, Marvel Comics movies, and any Disney movie. People are protesting outside of Disney in Burbank. Today, people are canceling Disney cruises, and people are canceling trips to the Disney parks, Disney World, and Disneyland here in California. So screw Disney, screw ABC. You were concerned about the FCC and Donald Trump having power over you. And remember, you make your money off the people.
I say the greatest misconception about the Bible that I wanted to debunk with this book is that right-wing conservative politics have anything to do with the teachings and commandments of the biblical character named Jesus. Now, you don't need to believe in the Bible as literal fact to agree with this. The character of Jesus in this book, he's a peaceful, radical, nonviolent revolutionary who hung around with lepers, hookers, and criminals. He never spoke English, was not an American citizen. He was anti-wealth. You could say he was anti-capitalism. Completely anti-public prayer. Matthew 6:5, kids, check that shit out. Never anti-gay. But that's if you believe what's actually in the Bible. Do you ever watch Fox News and see these Christian nationalists and say to yourself, Jesus Christ, these people are the opposite of Jesus Christ? That's why I wrote the book. I got tired of a movement based on love and acceptance for the least of us being used as a cloaking device for douchebaggery.
I no longer consider myself a Christian. Imagine the headline. Pastor no longer Christian. But I no longer consider myself that because that term Christian has been co-opted by the wrong people. It has come to mean something completely different than what the followers of Jesus Christ should be professing. So I simply call myself a follower of Jesus Christ. That's what the early followers called themselves. 300 years before the term Christian was ever used, but this has to mean something. Jesus came to show us a new way of life, and a new way of being in relationship with each other and with creation. Jesus came to break down the barriers that separate people, be they religious barriers, class barriers, economic barriers. Jesus came with a preferential option for the poor, and although he did not look upon rich people as bad, he did call on all of us to feed the hungry, clothe the naked, and welcome the stranger. These are absolutes, by the way. They are not up for negotiation. But for me, being a follower of Jesus Christ means that I have no other option but to love others. Now, I don't have to agree with them. I don't even have to like them. I can work for justice and oppose everything that they believe in to their core, but I still